Welcome everybody to this is May 13, I think, and it's hard to remember what day of the month it is. They all start to look alike and sound alike, but I know it's Wednesday because we're having Bible study. So the topic I wanted to talk about this time is um, what new Christian insights or changes do I want to keep? And I had an email today from a publishing house that said, not often does the church get to do a reset button. So this is kind of an opportunity for all of us to think about a reset button and to think about what is there that we are adapting that could be a good lesson for us to hang on to, and what might be something that we don't really care to lose. So I'm going to have us read the scriptures a little bit later, but first of all, I think I have something I can hopefully share. This is the Chinese characters for crisis, and the one on your right is opportunity, and this one is crisis. Chinese character. It looks like a cliff or someone about to fall off the cliff, and that's the words on the Chinese characters that make up opportunity and danger, which then means crisis. I don't know about you, but I can certainly see that um, this is a danger, and you can probably relate that people dying and the numbers that they're dying is pretty much of a danger. But does anybody see this as an opportunity? We're in the midst of a crisis, I think. Is there anything that you found as an opportunity that you've gained? Last week we talked about gratitude, and people had quite a few things they were grateful for.
I think maybe just stopping and looking at your life a little bit differently and where you want to focus your thoughts and some of your intentions.
So your thoughts and your attentions, is that what you said?
Intentions,
Intentions, right.
right?
Reevaluate things a little bit.
Right.
Why do I take a shower every day?
Well, I hope you were doing that before, but okay.
And I don't know, there's lots of things that why do we use so much gasoline? Why is our nation running on fossil fuel? I think about the kind of the big picture things that we might have to stop and look at differently.
I think so too. Like, how much do we consume?
How much do we consume?
Right.
How much toilet paper does one person need?
How many bottles of water?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, it's just interesting.
yeah. There was a
And
big run on,
is it fear that's driving it or something else?
is it fear that drives it? Yeah. There was a huge run on bottled water, wasn't there, in the
Yeah.
stores for a while?
And I'm like, was it in the water? Is the virus in the water? I get my water out of my sink.
Yeah, and frankly, that's one of the things I'm grateful for is water that runs out of the sink, you know it?
I think
Yeah.
before the pandemic, I was kind of addicted to going to restaurants or going to the deli at King Supers, and now staying home, I'm cooking a lot and 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 realize that actually a better meal can be had at home.
Yeah, healthier and fresh. Yeah. So I go to the grocery store a lot less, for sure.
And I'm enjoying my backyard too. My mom has last year she planted hundreds of bulbs, and and every day we will go out and see what's blossomed and what's new in the backyard, and I knew I had a nice backyard and before, but I don't know, it's just there's something about I'm really enjoying it now, and I can enjoy nature in my own backyard.
Right. I sat in your backyard and I second that. It was beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we're kind of reflecting on what do I what has changed that I think that I want to keep. Is there anything that your life is reflecting that you've done differently that you want to keep after this pandemic might someday might be over?
Well, during the crisis, we have watched either on YouTube or Zoom services from various places within the Church of the Brethren in the country, and it's helped to stretch us. And I'm thinking maybe we will want to continue part of that.
How has it stretched you, Larry?
Well,
Are you doing 3 hours of church every week?
sometimes.
Did you say stressed or stretched?
Stretched.
Okay.
Sometimes we have done 3 hours or more. Just getting the word from other folks in the denomination and hear their thoughts and see their musical talents and their ideas has been helpful.
Right.
In our little church where we're only about 15 people, why it's kind of the old routine again and again and again with no Sunday school, no Bible study, this type of thing.
So you're adding some opportunities into your day, it sounds like.
Right.
I certainly have seen church differently. I used to think that church was geographically bound, and wasn't it sad when our young people would move away, or we would lose someone because they got a new job, or there was a big life event, and now it's like geography doesn't really mean very much. It doesn't present much of a barrier. So technology, I mean, I've always had a landline, but now um, I can connect with people on a Sunday morning without doing anything other than what I'm doing right now.
That's interesting that you should say that. I've struggled a long time with the issue of technology because so many people feel that that's a move away from God because you're going to the digital age. And, it threatens the spiritual connection to God if you focus too much on that. But in the past 3 or 4 years, because of the traveling that we've had to do, we've visited with so many churches. We've got one in Blackhawk, one in Aurora, one in Arvada. Prince of Peace is the base, and one in Finland even. And with the pandemic, we've had an extra opportunity to connect digitally like this with so many congregations, and it's helping to enforce the relationship between ourselves and Christ, and focus on Christ is the church rather than the buildings, and we can remember that and Larry and Mary and and Steve are all parts of the church rather than the church itself. And focus on Christ as the Godhead.
Right. So the building is almost like an ad, like a blip on the screen, isn't it? We've had a lot of focus on the building for so many years, and it really flipped on its head. I wonder if the church thought that the printed press was of the devil when it came out, 500 years ago or however long that was. And every 500 years, there's this theory that there's a radical revolution that happens. And so people are totally getting the word in different ways. And so it's no longer word of mouth that we get the word. We have to find that each generation finds its own way to get in, to get infiltrated with the word of God. Oh, I'm getting some feedback. Let me see if, are you hearing anything weird?
Yeah.
Okay, is that better?
Now, yes.
Okay, that's weird. Okay. So is there anything that you know that you want to get rid of, that you have made that decision that this is not something that you want to keep any longer? I hope we don't say the building.
It's nice to have the building as a base, but focusing on the people in the building is so much better. We just need to remember that in order for the building to stay there, there needs to be some support from each and every one of us in some ways.
Right,
Some more than others.
right.
I think maybe in the future I'll be more willing to stay closer to home, and that I don't have to go and get on a bus and go 25 miles to go to a church. I think, I mean, I think I might stay closer at home. But
Right.
yeah,
I might think about, why am I making this trip?
right.
Why am I jumping in my car?
Yeah.
We're supposed to say 10 miles in a geographic 10-mile radius or so is
Hmm.
what they're recommending. So,
was thinking about time a little differently. The reality is we have just as much time today as we did before any of this happened. Although the coronavirus or staying home, all these things have caused, there's changes in terms of how we maybe use our time, or think, maybe we think time's going more slowly. So, and really, the reality is it's up to me how I use my time. Now, maybe I have to go to work more than I was doing then than I am now, but still, what do I do with the time that I have? But I have a lot more control than I perhaps think I do.
yeah, I'm sure I have more time, Dave. It sure
Well,
seems like it.
Maybe I don't know if the day's lengthening or not, but
Anybody else think they have more time than they used to before the corona?
I've got a comment. 'Cause I've got to leave, but I'll look forward to coming back. What I've noticed, well, a couple things. Dave wrote something earlier that I saw on the screen. It was a greeting, and I had no idea how to respond. So hi, Dave. Thank you for this is about the third time I've been on Zoom. What I've noticed here, and I think I'm the same as what I've noticed, that is Gail asks us to ask questions that are reflective about our new situation. And it seems like everybody's having some trouble coming up with the questions. I don't know if the problem is that we're still so living in the past or living in a future that's not here yet that we don't want to ask questions that we should ask. And I'm saying that to myself because I'm thinking, what kind of Bible study might we have in 3 weeks? Are we going to be more? Are we going to interchange more? Are we going to have more to say? Are we going to have? Is there going to be more conversation and less sort of moments of silence? So I don't know. I look forward to engaging in this because it's not. I don't. Most of what I do is complain about how people are running, how our mayor's doing here in Amarillo, and why the meat packing companies aren't figuring out what they need to do to be responsible and so forth. But I'm not asking very good questions along the line that Gail, I think, maybe hoped to elicit. So that's a criticism of myself, and maybe I can be constructive when I join you once again. And great for you all to come and try to begin to work through these kinds of applying the faith to a new reality. So thank you. Look forward to talking to you about details and so forth. And I'm gonna check out if I can hit the right button here.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing, Dale. That was
Bye-bye.
Dale Goldsmith, who's my religion professor from college, McPherson College days, McPherson, Kansas. So I think one of the things that scares me sometimes is how am I going to remember any of these insights? It will be tempting to just go, well, that was then, blah, that was a blip on the screen. But I'm wondering, what do I want to remember about these values that Jesus teaches us are important? I wonder if someone can read the Galatians passage, Galatians 5:16 through 22, and it seems like there's some lessons in there that might be helpful for us to hold on to.
I can read it.
Okay, thanks, Bitsy.
Live by the Spirit, I say, and do not gratify the desires of the flesh. For what the flesh desires is opposed to the Spirit, and what the Spirit desires is opposed to the flesh. For these are opposed to each other to prevent you from doing what you want. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not subject to the law. Now the works of the flesh are obvious: fornication, impurity, licentiousness, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, anger, quarrels, dissensions, factions, envy, drunkenness, carousing, and things like these. I am warning you, as I warned you before, those who do such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. By contrast, the fruit of the Spirit is joy, love, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There is no law against such things.
Yeah, I had to change the verse to 23. Sorry about that. You don't want to stop in the list, the middle of that list. So does anything pop out to you after coronavirus and reading this list of kind of some hints and some guidelines from the book of Galatians?
I don't know how it was organized, but when I walk daily on Red Fox, which is the street we live on, each household, and we didn't get the message, but I'm thinking of doing it, is they have painted a rock in front of their house, in front of their driveway or wherever, with many of these things on it, our neighbor has kindness, the people across the street have joy. And it's kind of interesting to walk out the street and see a rock with each of them.
I've seen
Spirit on it.
I've seen tiny little rocks too.
Oh, these are bigger rocks.
Yeah. On my walk, on my bike ride, I saw be kind. It's like people are dropping rocks everywhere.
Gives a whole new meaning to the rocks crying out.
Right. I mean, that's one way to remind yourself, isn't it? I mean, you can paint a rock if nothing else. It shouldn't be too hard to paint a rock. I was really struck by the first part of this passage. For what the flesh desires is opposed to the spirit, and what the spirit desires is opposed to the flesh. When you take out all of those stores and all the all the places where you can spend money, there's not a whole lot of places where your flesh can get a whole lot of gratification. So you've eliminated a lot of those things of the flesh right there, because boom, all the doors are shut, and so you're left inside your house to come up with things that are going to, I mean, if you're going to sin, you could still do these things, but it might be a little harder to do some of these things that are in the list of licentiousness and idolatry and sorcery. So one of the things that automatically eliminated is some of these ways that we can easily stray from the gifts of the Spirit. I had never thought of that before, but it's like, wow, this is harder to stray than it was before the coronavirus.
Well, it's not really harder to stray. Well, it's, I don't consider it harder to stray, but I see more temptations to stray when you spend your time isolated indoors watching television with the commercials that's on. But when you break the isolation and go out and leave, it's a whole lot easier to focus on the loveliness of the earth rather than the gaudiness of earthiness.
Of commercialism and capitalism and things that we pay attention to. Yeah, so they can't grab our attention nearly as much if we're in a different era. So the fruits of the Spirit, do any of those speak to you as things that are improving or hard to hang on to, or how do you see that in your current lives?
I see an increase in peace, actually, and I've noticed that actually before the pandemic, when I was doing a lot of house cleaning, so I'm at home a lot, that it seems like if I'm at home more, I tend to be more relaxed in my day-to-day life than if I'm going to downtown Denver and running errands and
And there's a lot less traffic fighting.
yes. Yes. However, I did just go on a walk this afternoon, and I found it very hectic, emotionally straining, because I was trying to socially distance, and there's a lot of people out today, and I was trying to avoid people, and yeah, so, and I was shocked by how many people were on the Highland Canal. I avoided the canal, but there's just groups of people walking and not really distancing themselves from each other, and it kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
So.
So
So I had a
that's
good walk. I saw some pretty flowers in people's yards, and I like the sidewalk chalk drawings. Yeah, I often, yeah, I'll stop and read what people have written, and appreciate it more. But yeah, trying to avoid people is kind of different and stressful.
yeah, it's and see who's following the directions to wear mask and who's not, and who's
Right,
socially
that's right.
distancing.
It's almost like I'm becoming inside my head like this kind of, I don't know, kind of like a cop trying to like, oh, that person's not doing that right, and that, and yeah, so, and maybe I should just be a little laid back and but
Right. And does fear come in or not? Do you let fear
right,
in or not let it in? Or
yep,
I don't know. Patience may be one of the things we get to work on during pandemic.
yeah,
Well, I think it's kind of interesting that, this list of the fruits of the Spirit is in one of the most contentious writings of Paul. Because Paul, so to me, it's almost like Paul, he's reminding himself he's got to be a little bit easier on himself and others. Like the people you see on the path who aren't doing social distancing, right? I mean, so, because I'm just looking back, I always kind of try to get context, in Galatians, like the first chapter in verse 6, he's astonished that people are quickly deserting the gospel. And in chapter 2, he opposes Peter to his face because he was clearly in the wrong, right? That's 2 verse 11. In 3:1, he says, "You foolish Galatians." So, well, I'm not so sure those, he's doing the fruits of the Spirit when he's making those kinds of things. But, he does talk about in chapter 5, it's freedom that, Christ has set you free. And the law is love your neighbor, the single command, love your neighbor as yourself. Anyway, I think it's interesting that, because we quote this passage a lot, the fruits of the Spirit. But to me, it's almost like, yeah, if anybody needed it, Paul needed it, which maybe says we all need it.
Yeah, I've been reading this book about Paul, and I'll mention that a little bit. But put into context, he had some really knockdown, drag out fights with the other church leaders in Jerusalem, and he was dead set that they were wrong, and so he was going to make sure that there was a fork in the path. Gentiles would be included, or you had to become a Jew before you could be included, and they were really going to go head to head on that one, and so that brought out some of these big fights. And it's interesting that the church didn't always see eye to eye, but they had to learn how to get along. And eventually, some of the people he fought with, he hangs out again with later on in his writings. So it looks like they must have settled it and became friends again somehow in the midst of this fight. So I think, go ahead.
I think or to me, it seems like people are a little more friendly, and they you go by or you meet them on the path or something, and many times it seemed like before they were plugged in with earphones or whatever, and just hardly recognized that they were meeting anybody. And many times they will stop and talk, keep your distance, but oh, isn't this a beautiful day, or what a cute puppy you have, or whatever. But it just seems like people have kind of opened up a little bit more.
That's a real switch in our society, don't you think?
Yes.
And is that something that we want to hang on to?
Well, I think so. One thing I've noticed is, 20 years ago, when I take the bus, people were more likely to talk with each other. And then it seemed like with cell phones coming along and these smartphones and whatnot and computers, people just stopped talking on the bus, and the bus became really quiet. And and I was been worried for, I don't know, past 5 or 10 years, thinking what's happening to our society. We, instead of being a society that, when we have free time, we chit chat with each other, we're closing down and just getting into our own devices. So maybe society's going to come back, and there'll be a new wave of people chatting and being friendly. I don't know. So,
Right. And if we lose the normal safety nets that we have, it's like this may be the last opportunity I have to talk to a neighbor. We don't know who's going to get infected or who's not, and it makes us maybe think about life differently. How is this a precious person of God? Can we see them as a precious person, or is this an annoyance? This person's on the path. Oh, what a they've ruined my day. They're on the path when I am.
right. True.
I think one of the things I have appreciated with the virus, which is weird, but even with the church doing this all remote, I think it takes away some of the barriers. Like getting the chance to talk to Larry and Donna on Sunday. I don't think I would have done that. I would have met them in church. So I think things like that has helped with taking some barriers down. And because I work, I've noticed the same thing with work. It's like now you're like doing this all day long, and some of the barriers get broken down a little bit.
Huh.
So I hope that is something that continues on.
Right. So we don't have the same social rules. It seems like we are changing the social rules now.
It's a good way to describe it. Yeah, that's a great way of describing it.
We don't have to be. If we speak up, we'll be seen as interrupting and an annoyance rather than as a friendly human being.
Right.
Wow. And I think people ask all the time, how are you doing? And you seriously worry that everybody's doing okay.
I think there's sincerity to it.
Sincerity, yeah. So I was thinking about this passage in Deuteronomy. We talked about it a little bit before. Does somebody want to read this pretty famous passage from Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 1 through 9?
This off. I can read it.
Thanks, Lyle.
Now this is the commandment, the statutes and the ordinance, which I, the Lord your God, commanded me to teach you. That sounds hard. Your Lord commanded me to teach you, that you may do them in the land to which you are going over to possess it, that you may fear the Lord your God, and you and your son and your son's son, by keeping his statutes and his commandments, which I command you, in all the days of your life, and that your days may be prolonged. Hear, therefore, O Israel, and be careful to do them. O Israel, and be careful to do them, that it may go well with you, and that you may multiply greatly, as the Lord, the God of your fathers, has promised you, in a land flowing with milk and honey. See, how far do I go here?
Through 8. Wait,
Okay.
through 9. Through 9.
Okay. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words which I command you this day shall be upon your heart, and you shall teach them diligently to your children. You shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. And you shall bind them as a sign upon your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. And you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates.
Okay. So we talked about that in an earlier Bible study a little bit. This is called the Shema, which is the first word in Hear, O Israel. It's the command in Hebrew for hear. So they call it the Shema. And evidently, God was worried that people would forget what God was trying to teach the people. So I think, well, nothing's changed there, huh? And so what is the direction then? How are we supposed to, how does God ask the Hebrew people to remember what the important lesson was?
Well, they're supposed to remember the commandments, but you're doing it not just as okay, sit down, we're going to learn this now. It's in everything you do and say and all your actions throughout the day and when you go to bed at night.
Right. So it's so important that he says do it when you sit down, when you rise up. And who are you supposed to teach them to?
Children and your grandchildren.
Right. So in one generation, we could lose all of these insights and all of the faith that we have passed on from each generation to each generation. In my understanding, it only takes one generation to stop teaching, and then you have the chance that there is no more generations after you. So I guess that makes this passage pretty important for the Hebrew people. But what about Christians? Are we doing any of these things that it says in the Deuteronomy passage?
I would hope we're doing them.
I hope we are. So we talked about phylacteries. Dave, you want to do your lesson on phylacteries again? You're muted, honey.
Sorry there. It's taking literally the things that, that it says in terms of putting them on your forehead, binding them on your forehead, or writing them on your door frames, the mezuzah, and there's nothing wrong with that because it's just a reminder. I mean, I have behind me a cross. I don't know if I can, well, here it's sort of blocked. But, some of you probably have a cross or some sort of, something in your house that reminds you when you look at it of who you are and whose you are. So that, it's those kinds of things. And those are all personal, right? I mean, I have some things like this on my desk, which is from the Greek Orthodox tradition, right? The icons, iconography. So, I've picked up a few of these that are, I find helpful and interesting, and maybe some of you have some things like that.
So the idea is, what will it take to remind you of the lessons that God's trying to teach? I always say we can either get reminded by a 2x4 or by a less painful way to remember with some kind of a photo or a picture on the wall or something. I guess we can choose however we wish to be reminded. So obviously this passage is quoted in a lot by New Testament because Jesus quotes it as what is the greatest commandment, and we talked about that a little bit in an earlier Bible study. But this was known by every single, if this is true, and the Hebrew people were doing this, this was known by every single child, man and woman, who had ever been raised in a Jewish tradition. So everybody knew this verse. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. So that means you have one God, one Lord, and you shall love the Lord with all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your soul. And so that was something that was so important that God put this message as to teach it, teach it, teach it. And I often think that those lessons just get lost on so much of our generations today. It's like, oh yeah, that's what does that have to do with me? Well, why should I listen to that? And it only seems to me that you're avoiding a giant pitfall by listening to anything that God might be trying to say to you in the Ten Commandments or in the greatest commandment. It seems like here's how you avoid a pitfall. And sure enough, well, let me test that for myself. Let me see how that works. And you go and do exactly the opposite of whatever it is that God's trying to teach you. I don't think, maybe I'm the only one who says, well, let me see for myself. How to avoid needless pain.
Well, I'm getting kind of addicted to television, sitting at home, and instead of tying myself to more godly things, I'm starting to sometimes shift and like just watching any old television program that comes on. And so, and then after that, I just feel like, my goodness, I can't believe how much cars you see on TV, or gun violence, or just dumb things. And maybe I should anchor to something more wholesome, like studying Spanish, or going for a walk or something like that. That's probably how I should spend my nights. When I wake up in the middle of the night, can't sleep, I should, instead of turning on the TV, and see what the latest news is on the coronavirus, I should just go outside,
We'll look at the stars or do
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
Sure.
Find a way to put your mind at ease. Yeah.
True.
Yeah. I always think, boy, if I could just help my kids avoid the same mistakes that I did, wouldn't that be great? My kids don't think that's a good idea.
Well, someone early on, said, and I just keep thinking about it, early on in this time said, don't think about everything, like in big chunks, but break your life up into 15-minute chunks, And so, yeah, I can do a walk for 15 minutes, or, and it's okay to watch TV for a little bit or whatever, but then, have a goal in mind, right? And there's some things I want to do, like play my guitar. I've done it a little bit, but I probably could do better if I would think about it in 15 minutes rather than, darn, I don't play it like John Lennon did or somebody, so I'm not going to try anymore.
Right. So how do you think it will help you? What do you think will help you to remember this down the road a ways? Is there anything that you're holding on to that's going to remind you to hang on to what you've learned? I've been journaling some, trying to think about what I'm learning so that I won't forget some of these insights that might be important. Why is this important? Why was doing this the way I always did it? Why was that so important? Why did I have to be so busy? Why did I have to rush here and there? What's so important about that? So we have the scripture to remind us, and I guess we could all buy, what is it, mezuzahs, Dave? What do you call them on your doorposts?
On your doorpost, Yeah, it's
Maybe
called a mezuzah, which is
mezuzah.
just the Hebrew word for like a symbol or whatever.
Maybe I need to paint some rocks so I'll remember what I'm supposed to be remembering.
Some
Well,
wonderful songs and music. The words can remind us of a lot of this too.
Right.
yeah. Well, I mean, anything that reminds you. I'm sitting at my desk, so I'm going to show you something that I've had for. Boy, this was given to me 40 years ago. Is it showing up backwards for you?
No,
Oh,
it
oh,
shows.
it's perfect.
No, it's
Perfect.
perfect.
Okay. Yeah, you see it says Church of the Brethren at the bottom. I mean, this is when I was a youth minister back before going to seminary, right? And someone made it for me. Just really kind of cool. It's a piece of slate, actually, with a parchment kind of thing on it. Anything like that. That's, obviously I've kept that all these years, and yeah, I don't look at it every day, but maybe I should. It's like a mezuzah. The mezuzah on the doorpost, what that is every time you enter, what folks would do is kiss their lips and touch it. And, that's obviously it's a ritual and can become ritualistic, but it's also something that's a reminder.
We can
One
make
thing
a,
I've, oh,
go ahead.
well, I was going to say one thing I've done in this pandemic is I've done a little more cleaning, and I set up a place. I mean, I have this blanket up, but I have books and stuff everywhere, but where I can sit and I can read, and I've made kind of like a more comfortable office for myself. And in fact, and maybe if I alter my environment in a way that better reflect my priorities and good priorities, that would be a way that I could remember is, yeah. So.
Now you're reminding me that I was going to clean my office. I don't know. It's taken me a few weeks to get there, but I'm still working.
Well, what you're describing is clearing the decks, right? And obviously that can be spiritually, but even like you doing something like that symbolizes that, right? Do something small. Gosh, our whole house isn't clean, but there's parts of it that are getting clean.
So why am I holding on to all these things? I think that's one of the things I'm learning in this pandemic. So this quote is from this book that I've been talking about, N.T. Wright, Paul, a biography. And it's the very last few pages of the book. He tells this famous story of Rabbi Akiba, and one of the greatest Jewish teachers of all times, went on praying the Shema, declaring his loyalty to the one God and his determination to stand for his kingdom, as the Roman torturers, catching up with the Jewish rebels after the Bar Kokhba revolt in AD 135, ran steel combs through his flesh until he died a horrible and lingering death. He continued to pray, Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. His disciples standing by asked him, this is a famous story that they relayed, they asked him in awe and horror, how could he go on praying that prayer even now? His answer, recorded much later, but reflecting what we know of the man, is a model of wise, humble Jewish thought. All his life long, he explained, he had been troubled by the words in the prayer, and with all your soul. He wondered what that meant and if he would ever have the opportunity to fulfill that part of the prayer. Now that he finally had the opportunity, he declared he was going to seize it. This then was what it meant to love the Lord with one's life. Akiba died with the word Echad, one, on his lips. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. how do you say that word? Echad?
Echad.
A statement of loyalty, even to the death. That's a story that might stick with us for the remainder of the week, thinking about how this greatest commandment was all of his life in this. He lived in the 2nd century and taught this story that has been passed on all these centuries later, so that even now it sticks with us. So next week I have the person who came on, Dale Goldsmith. I've invited him if he wants to give a guest lecture on Paul and to understand why so many people hate Paul's writings and so many people love Paul's writing. And so he's thinking about whether he wants to be a guest on our Zoom Bible study either next week or this week after. Would that be interesting to folks if we had a guest lecturer?
I think so.
Okay. And if he doesn't come up with that, I was thinking what we might do, and if he's not ready next week, what we might do instead, or one of the next coming up weeks. I've been reading a guide on how to read the Bible, which talks about looking at the context, which Dave talks about. That's one thing we might do. Or I'm open for any and all suggestions here, so feel free to pitch in.
Well, I like the idea of the guide on how to read the Bible.
Is that interesting to folks? I think what I might do is scan some pages. One person. I could scan the pages it's like a 3-page little summary that we could have, that you could read ahead of time or look at during the Bible study.
I think that sounds interesting.
That sounds interesting. We could go with that for whatever the next opening is, whether it's Dale on Paul or on how to read the Bible, and I'll find out. It'll be a surprise next week as to what is coming, the mystery. I also have to confess, one thing that I'm really thankful for is that I can wear the same outfit over and over because nobody sees me, and so they'll never know how many times I've worn this outfit. So I'm very grateful that I don't have to do as much laundry. So with that closing theological thought, anybody have any closing words here?
I'd just like to thank you for having me at your Bible study. I've enjoyed it. I like Bible studies that make me think and stretch me and help guide me through my week. So thank you.
Great. We're so glad you joined. Greg has visited our church once or twice, so we're glad that you could be here.
Yeah. Thank you.
Vivian, you've been awfully quiet. You have any words? You're muted still. There you go.
It's a little girl and her father that decided to paint rocks and hide them around their neighborhood with words like peace and love. And they had really a lot of fun, but she thought she was doing something positive. And she had a list of about 7 things how to do it. You find a perfect rock, you paint it completely, you make an image on it, and she had about 7 things she had to do. Then you go out and hide them. So maybe some of those rocks you're finding are ones this little girl, about 5, I think, or 4 or 5, I don't know her age, and her dad were painting and hiding around the neighborhood.
That's great. That's a great kid activity, isn't it? Wow. Well, thanks everybody. And I think we'll hopefully see everybody next week.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Good to see you all.